it wouldn't hurt probably once a year to take a 4-week break, because for the first 2 to 3 weeks, you're gonna still have testosterone in your system, just because the long-acting esters last that long. So, it might not be a bad idea to take a month off, once a year, just to see how you feel. Maybe regenerate some of the receptors a little bit. You might get a little bump in progress, but is it necessary? I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
There was a question about liver enzymes from Sinslescu Razvan. General about keeping your liver enzymes low. What is the best way? I tried injectable Hepamerts, NaC, L-ornithine, liver protect pills, you name it. Though TGP remains at 50 to 90.
Yeah, I just talked about this the other day on After Hours, actually. Liver enzymes are a terrible, terrible term to call these SGOT, SGPT, all these enzymes that they measure on blood work. It's not a good term. It's very misleading, and I'll tell you why. Because these enzymes, they're metabolic enzymes, meaning they're enzymes that initiate metabolism in the cells. They're in all our cells. Now, for the average person who doesn't work out, okay, if you check these enzymes and they're high, more than likely they came from the liver, because no one's breaking down muscle tissue. The problem is these enzymes are found in very high amounts in muscle tissue. So if you're a bodybuilder and you go into the gym 5-6 days a week and you're breaking down an enormous amount of muscle tissue, you're going to leak these enzymes from the damaged muscle into the bloodstream, which is going to give the impression that you have that liver damage. Because in other words, if these are also found in the liver and they're high in the bloodstream, then that can mean that your liver has been damaged. And so, especially in a bodybuilder who's using steroids, what do most of these doctors think? Oh, you have liver damage. But they're not specific to liver. They're specific to muscle too. And I noticed when I was, lifting lighter, when I first came back from, my surgeries, my liver enzymes were normal, and they had never been normal my whole life. Okay. Every time from being an endurance athlete to bodybuilding naturally to bodybuilding on stuff, the liver enzymes, as I got bigger, the enzyme levels went higher, which makes sense because the more muscle you have and the more muscle you break down, the more enzyme you can leak. As you get smaller, you have less muscle mass in your body, you won't raise your enzymes as high. So when a doctor says these enzymes can only come from liver, it's like it's backwards. They can't come from liver. They can only come from muscle, because only muscle has enough volume in your whole body to create that much enzyme to raise your enzyme levels 2, 3, 4 times normal. And so it's not a real good measure or metric, as we say, for damage. It's a good metric for damage. Not a good metric for liver damage, because they're coming from muscle. And really, I mean, I could tell you to take 2 weeks off from the gym and you still might not have completely normal levels, because your body's constantly in a state of breakdown. If you don't, a lot of people think if you don't work out at all for like 6 weeks, your body starts breaking down muscle tissue because you're not using it, and that will leak the enzyme into the muscle too. So not training is as bad as training. So it's almost like you have to lower your intensity of training for a period of time, so you maintain your muscle and you don't break it down, but you don't raise those enzyme levels too high. But it's not a good. They got to come up with a better measure of liver. If you want to test yourself out, and you're worried, you could always go for a liver sonogram, and that's going to give you like a read on whether there's any damage or any cirrhosis or any kind of, fibrotic tissue in your liver, or if you have fatty liver infiltrate or anything like that. So that's a better way to do it if you're really worried. But for most young guys and for most people, when I see high liver enzymes, I just look past it. It doesn't even faze me. I'm not even like concerned at all about it, to be honest with you.
Let's go to NY Bigger. When on TRT for health reasons only, is there any benefit to taking a break of 8 weeks or so to allow your receptors to reset? Will your TRT regimen benefit from such a break? I know it's important for bodybuilders, but wondering if it's important for people on low dose TRT, like under 200 or whatever. Can there be any adverse effect by taking such a break?
It's a good question. And a lot of people don't feel a need to, because they're not really, if they're on TRT, they know they're not going to put on massive amounts of muscle anyway. They're just going to feel good, and maybe they're going to hit a certain point and maintain that muscle mass. It wouldn't hurt probably once a year to take a 4-week break, because for the first 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to still have testosterone in your system, just because the long acting esters last that long. So, it might not be a bad idea to take a month off, once a year, just to see how you feel. Maybe regenerate some of the receptors a little bit. You might get a little bump in progress. But is it necessary? No, because there's no toxicity to a shot of testosterone every week. And I don't think you're really shutting down your receptors that much on a physiological dose of every week. I just don't think you're raising your levels enough where the androgen receptors would say, hey, we got to downregulate because there's too much testosterone stimulating the body here. So that's why I don't recommend it. Now, I have people who do cycles and then they want to go right from the cycle to TRT levels. That might not be the smart. I think in that case, I'd rather see you do a PCT 4 weeks off and then, or at least do a PCT for 4 weeks and then go on to HRT, just to give your body a break. But if you're doing TRT all the time, I don't think there's a need to go on a break at all, unless like you wanted to get, your wife pregnant or something like that.
Let's go to Mike Molinaro. When I count macros and weigh my food out, am I counting the macros of the food after it's cooked? For example, 8 ounces of chicken, let's say, has 35 grams of protein. I weigh it out 8 ounces after it's cooked, right? Same with rice?
Yeah, well, let's not confuse. Let's that's a little mathematics lesson here. If I'm telling you to eat 8 ounces of chicken, you want to measure it and weigh it, okay, after it's cooked, okay, because that's what you're actually going to be putting into your mouth. You're not eating the raw chicken, you're eating the cooked chicken. So I want you to eat 8 ounces, that's 50 grams of protein, or 55 grams, right around there. That's great. Rice is not done by weight, okay, not at least cooked stuff. So with rice, let's say you have a box of rice, okay, and you look on the box and it says half a cup uncooked of this minute rice yields 37 grams of protein, which let's say you need about 40 grams, it leads 37 grams of carbs. Let's say you're looking for about 40 grams of carbs or 35 grams of carbs. All right, that's perfect. So you take a half a cup uncooked, you put it into a bowl, you add water to it, and then you cook it. Now that might blow up to a whole cup, right? But you're not, at that point, you already know whatever you put into that bowl is 35 grams or 37 grams of carbs. It doesn't matter how much water you add to it and how much it gains in weight because it absorbs that water. It's still 37 grams of carbs because it's the starchy content in the rice that you're going to be eating. So for that, you don't have to weigh it again after you cook it because you're pre-weighing it based on what the serving size is according to the box. Now, with a baked potato or like a sweet potato, like a baked potato is about 4.5 grams of carbs per ounce. So let's say you eat 10 ounces of baked potato, okay? That's going to yield 45 grams of carbs. That you would weigh after you cook it because sometimes you can lose a little weight when you're cooking something like that because sometimes some of the potato falls off in the water and stuff like that if you're boiling it or something like that. So I would weigh potatoes. They probably weigh almost exactly the same pre-cooking and post-cooking. But if you want, I would just weigh the potato after. But with rice, it's easy because the box tells you how to measure it. So I hope that clarifies it. It's like, it sounds confusing, but it's really pretty easy if you think about it.
Question on keto from James Walters. Ketogenic diets and LDL cholesterol, especially for lean, massive hyper responders, impact, if any, on cardiovascular health, inflammation markers such as CRP being almost zero due to avoidance of sugar alcohols, and rancid oils, LDL particular size distribution versus absolute LDL cholesterol importance?
Yeah, I can simplify this very simply. If you get your blood work, like I just got my blood work done recently, and I was talking about this on After Hours. I got a TRT clinic wanted my blood work, and my endocrinologist wanted blood work. They both ordered same time. I went into LabCorp. They pulled my blood and they filled both orders. Okay, at the exact same time. Blood work came back. The values are not the same. They're not dramatically different, but they're significantly different. That some of them were high and some of them were in the normal range, and they were just different values. And they were pulled exactly at the same time from my body. What does that mean? It means that the blood work it's an estimate. It's not an exact number. All right, so you have to remember that right off the bat, that when you get your blood work done, it's not an exact measure. Now, what was I confused myself? What was the question again, Sid?
It's kind of a long.
No, what was it? What would they wanted me to comment on?
That's what I was trying to figure out myself. I mean, it was like, okay, kind of messes ketogenic diets and LDL cholesterol, especially.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. I remember. So now, if your LDL cholesterol is high, okay. If it's high, you have to ask yourself a question. All right, my CRP or C-reactive protein is normal. My triglycerides are normal. I've gone for a cardiac CT scan and it's normal. I have zero calcium, or any kind of buildup. Why is my LDL high? Well, what you should do is you should ask your doctor to test for particle size, okay? Because the particle size of the LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, is important. If you have small particle size, that's dangerous. And I can give you a little analogy that Dr. Pierce used. Imagine like your blood vessel wall has these little pores in it, and little tiny LDL cholesterol pieces can get caught in the wall and start building up plaques. Whereas if you have large particle size for your LDL cholesterol, those big pieces can't get caught in the blood vessel walls and cause blockages. So you could have high LDL and not have it be dangerous to your heart because you have big particle size. You only have to worry if you have high LDL and small particle size. So now they're doing these tests regularly. You can ask your doctor to request what size particles you have on your LDL cholesterol, and they'll tell you. And that's a big difference. And that's why I've seen guys with very high LDL because it genetically runs in their family, but they have no blockages. And it's because their LDL is big particle size, it's not small particle size. So it adds another little twist and nuance to the cholesterol equation. It's not always just LDL cholesterol that dictates whether you're going to get blockages in your arteries or not. It's the particle size of the LDL that's important.
Alan Minch, how long does it take DECA to induce joint pain relief? I know you've said even on a low weekly dose of 50 to 100 mg yields these results. Does a higher dose of say 300 mg a week yield faster or better results in the area?
My experimentation with this is, when I would do DECA back in the day, I would do like 400 or 500 milligrams a week, and I always got really good joint relief. When I did that little test recently after I had my ankle fusion, I did 6 weeks of DECA. I used 100 milligrams, and you know what? After about 2 weeks, I noticed results, which is consistent because DECA takes about 2 weeks to get into the system, in good enough dose. And I got the same joint relief I found with 100 milligrams per week that I got with 500 or 600 milligrams per week. So the anti-inflammation effect is at a much lower dose, whereas the muscle building effect would obviously be, a higher dose is going to give you some better results. So I think 100 milligrams is probably adequate for anti-inflammation. And I would guess that the onset of action is probably still 2 weeks, whether you're doing a higher dose or a lower dose. It doesn't matter, because the DECA is just a long-acting ester. It takes a little time to build up in your system.